Hey, we're at the west tip of Horn, and our village pump stopped working. We're sinking.
That call right there. A boat taking on water, somewhere off a barrier island most people had never heard of. That's the moment this entire case starts. 2 days later, an 18-year-old is found dead. And now, weeks in, a former judge is going on camera saying investigators already have enough to justify an arrest. That's Carlos Moore, former Mississippi judge, now a civil rights attorney. And what he's saying right now is putting real pressure on this investigation. Today we're breaking down what the new autopsy actually found, what's in that missing tissue report that's got everyone talking, and exactly where this case stands right now, because the details in this one keep shifting fast. If you're new here, this is the Nolan Wells case. An 18-year-old college football player who vanished on a 4th of July boat trip to Horn Island off the Mississippi Gulf Coast and was found dead 2 days later. This case is moving fast, and we're covering every update. Hit subscribe now so you don't miss the next one. Let's get into it. Let's lay out the facts first, because there's a lot of noise around this case, and we want you working from what's actually confirmed. July 4th, 2026. Nolan Wells, an 18-year-old from Ocean Springs, Mississippi, heads out on a boat trip with a group of friends to Horn Island, a barrier island about 10 miles off the Gulf Coast. At some point that day, the group heads back, but Wells stays behind on the island. Authorities haven't given a clear public timeline for why he was separated from the group, and that gap is a big part of what's driving public attention. 2 days later, on July 6th, his body is recovered by a park ranger. Jackson County Sheriff John Ledbetter said early on that there was no initial indication of a crime, but stressed investigators were working to determine exactly what happened. Officials have also said the working theory, at this stage, is that Wells likely drowned, but that's not a final determination. That's the skeleton of the case. Now here's where it gets complicated. One of the most talked about pieces of evidence is a phone call. One of Wells' friends called a local towing company that day, reporting the boat was taking on water, saying it was sinking, and that they needed help getting back. Investigators have been going over that audio closely, because it speaks directly to the condition of the boat, the timeline of the group's return trip, and who was where when things started going wrong. It doesn't, by itself, tell us what happened to Wells after the group left the island, but it's a key piece for reconstructing the day. This is exactly the kind of detail that's fueled online speculation. So it's worth being careful here. The existence of a distress call about the boat doesn't confirm foul play. It confirms there was some kind of mechanical or safety issue on the return trip. What it means for Wells specifically is still under investigation. Real quick, if you've got a theory on that timeline, drop it in the comments right now. I read every single one, and I want to know what you're seeing that we might be missing. And if this breakdown is helping you actually understand the case instead of just the headlines, smash that like button. It's the only reason this video reaches more people who need to see it. Now to the part that's really escalated this story, the independent autopsy. Because the family, Christine Wells Wansley and Elmore Wansley, weren't satisfied with the pace of the official investigation, they commissioned a second, private autopsy. It was conducted by forensic pathologist Dr. Roger Mitchell, and the family's attorney, civil rights lawyer Ben Crump, presented the findings at a press conference in July. The headline finding, cause and manner of death, were listed as undetermined, pending investigation. But there's a detail in there that's driving a lot of the current conversation. The report noted that certain parts of Wells' throat were missing from the body when it was received for the second autopsy. Because of that gap, Dr. Mitchell wrote that he could not rule out injury to the neck as a contributing factor or cause of death. Crump also said the autopsy noted red discoloration at the back of Wells' head. To be clear, an independent pathologist saying he cannot rule out something is not the same as confirming it happened. It means the evidence available to him couldn't eliminate that possibility. That distinction matters, and it's part of why officials are now saying they want the state's autopsy, the official one, cross-referenced against these findings before anyone draws conclusions. The state autopsy has since been completed by Mississippi's medical examiner's office, but as of now, those results have not been made public. They're expected to go before a grand jury, which will ultimately decide whether the case involves criminal conduct. This is where former Judge Carlos Moore enters the picture. Moore is a Mississippi native, a former municipal judge, and a practicing civil rights attorney, so he's speaking from both a legal and a local perspective. In a series of interviews over the past few weeks, Moore has laid out why he thinks the investigation is moving too slowly. His core argument is straightforward. When you combine the missing throat tissue that cannot rule out language from the independent pathologist, the discoloration noted on the back of the head, and a timeline with real gaps in it, that's enough, in his view, for investigators to have moved further already. He said publicly that based on what he's seen, he would have signed off on an arrest warrant by this point. Now, it's important to frame that accurately. Moore isn't a party to the case. He doesn't have access to the sealed state autopsy or the full sheriff's department file. His comments are his professional opinion as a former judge and attorney reacting to the public evidence, not a legal ruling and not new evidence itself. That's a distinction Moore himself has generally acknowledged in these interviews. He's assessing what's out in the open and saying it's enough to justify faster action, not declaring guilt. He's also pushed back on the idea that this is just a tragic accident being overanalyzed. His argument is that the specific gaps in the autopsy, organs and tissue that were missing before the second exam could even happen, are unusual enough that they deserve real scrutiny rather than being waved off. Jackson County's DA's office, for its part, has said that presenting a case to a grand jury is standard procedure for unnatural or suspicious deaths in the county, and doesn't by itself imply a crime occurred. The sheriff has said his department welcomes the family's independent investigation and is treating the case seriously. This case first drew national attention partly because of the timeline, partly because of the medical questions, but also because of Wells' race. Wells was black, and the family's press conference, held at the NAACP's National Convention in Chicago with civil rights attorney Ben Crump and Reverend Al Sharpton present, has framed this as part of a broader pattern the family wants investigated fairly and transparently. Wells' mother, Christine Wells Wansley, has been direct about what she wants. Not a theory, not a headline, just an answer. In her words at that press conference, she just wants to know what happened to her son. That's really the through line of this entire case. A family that says the pace of the investigation hasn't matched the seriousness of the questions. So here's where things stand. The state autopsy is done but sealed. It's headed to a grand jury, which will decide whether criminal charges are warranted. Investigators are still working through the audio evidence and trying to nail down exactly who was with Wells and when. And public figures like Carlos Moore are using their legal background to keep pressure on the pace of that process. Nothing here is resolved. The manner of death is still officially undetermined. What we have is a family pushing for transparency, a pathologist who says he can't rule certain things out, and a growing chorus of legal voices saying the investigation needs to move faster. We'll keep tracking this one as the grand jury process moves forward. Here's the deal. This case is going to break wide open the second that state autopsy or the grand jury decision drops, and I am going to have it covered within hours, not days. So do 3 things right now before you scroll away. 1. Subscribe and hit that bell, because notifications are the only way you catch this the second it happens. 2. Hit like on this video. It costs you nothing, and it's the single biggest signal that tells YouTube to show this reporting to more people who deserve to see it. 3. Comment your honest take below. Do you think the state autopsy results should be public before this goes to a grand jury? I'm going to be in the comments today reading and replying, so don't just scroll past. Tell me what you think. That's where this case stands. I'll see you in the next one.